Bella Zanesco had a seemingly brilliant career, but after suffering a corporate career crisis and wondering what the hell just happened, she went on to become a world champion at her favourite sport of sailing, wrote a book, and reinvented herself as a high-performance career coach that supports leaders to avoid burnout and accelerate their careers. And Bella and I have a secret.
We do.
We've known each other for a long time.
A long time, maybe 10 years now.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah.
From when I lived in Sydney years ago. But Bella, you've gone on to do some pretty incredible things. And that's the reason why I want to talk to you today. So thank you for joining us.
No, I'm really happy to be here. Like, this is a cause I'm really passionate about, and to support you and other leaders in your organisation to get some stories out to support women, and I'm assuming men as well, accelerate their careers and have more fun, let's be honest.
Oh, number one, have fun.
Exactly.
Okay, let's go back to the point in time in your career when you were about to crash and burn. What was going on in your life then?
Basically, I was married to my job, so that was the first thing. And everything else was a distinct second or third priority. I was a senior leader in a telco responsible for a $300 million transformation. That was my last corporate role. And literally it all just became too much, and I started suffering from symptoms and signs of burnout, depression, and I ended up in the fetal position in my mother's arms asking myself, like, ooh, I'm smart. How did I end up like this? And so that sort of paved the way for a journey of pretty big self-exploration to figure out who I was, what I wanted, and what really mattered the most.
What did you do around that time to work through some of those questions?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I mean, in terms of, like, there's like a massive spectrum into burnout. So you don't all of a sudden sort of wake up one day and have depression and burnout, and they're two very different things, but they can be one of the same as well, because depression can be a manifestation of burnout. Essentially, I was just working too much, neglecting my health, neglecting my relationships, neglecting all the things that were good for me, that I guess I was either too busy or too lazy to sort of focus on, and really thought that I was quite invincible, as the world teaches you to be as a young woman rising up through the career, and that you can do it all, which I totally believe you can't. So, and clearly prove to myself that you can't, unless you're Superwoman, of which we're not, because we are human beings that have cells in our body and have disease centres and all these things. So essentially, at the end of the burnout spectrum is that stage called burnout, where most people either can't get out of bed or don't want to get out of bed. But then your question around how did you come out of that and what did you do and what were some of the things you asked, there's this period immediately after burnout, which is really focusing, it usually goes through about 6 to 12 months, and it's called self-acceptance. And it's really actually becoming aware that you've brought all of this on yourself, your belief systems have brought it on, your environments, your context, all of this you've actually brought on yourself. And you get into a place here where you sort of start to say, I accept that I did this to myself, and that actually this isn't okay going forward in my life. And so
taking responsibility.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Taking self-responsibility and not blaming everybody else in the workplace and your boss and your friends and everything else, is actually saying, I need to take a long, hard look at myself as to how I would let myself get into that zone. The stage after that is called recontract with self, which is essentially fancy words to say, time to ask the big questions, like, what do you want? Who are you? Who are you without this fancy job title, that fancy car, and that, place of work to go to where you feel very safe? And so I went on a journey for about 18 months to answer some of those big questions. They're still ongoing. And use sport as really the route through to give myself some motivations and goals outside of the business world, to find my health and fitness and regain my energy.
Okay, so you went from career burnout to world sailing champion.
Yes.
No pressure on the rest of us, okay? How do you get from there to there? That's an incredible journey.
Practicing these small habits. There was about 15 of them that I practiced on a daily basis for 18 months. And over time, the first habit I did was make my bed, which essentially meant that I had to jump out of it, right? You know what it's like, you start with a very small, it was like, I'm going to ditch all this crappy food out of my cupboard. I'm going to make sure that I get 8 to 9 hours worth of sleep a night. I'm going to make sure I move my body. I'm going to make sure I put, fuel that inspires my brain into and that heals my gut and my irritable bowel syndrome, which is another thing that I had. So I just started really small, like just what people might think are quite insignificant or that we take as hygiene factors for our health, but actually if you put all of those together, they can create some quite phenomenal results over time.
Just going back to the time in your life when you were experiencing that burnout, because I think there might be some people watching and who are not sure what burnout looks like. What is it?
Yeah,
maybe they've never experienced it, or maybe they have experienced it but they didn't know. So what does it look like?
Basically the World Health Organization this year has actually just classed burnout as an organizational phenomenon, which is quite interesting because it's one step off a clinical diagnosis in terms of their spectrum of analysis on disease states and things like that. So what it is it's a period of unrelenting stress that leads to some specific outcome that and if you look at it from a body, like what happens actually in your body is if you are exposed to extreme amounts of stress for a long period of time, vital things in your body start shutting down. And that happens because you're not flushing the cortisol out of your body, which is building when you're constantly stressed. So lots of things start going wrong. So you might find that you start with not having enough energy. You might find that you're apathetic to your work, or you're angry or irritable more often. And then full-on burnout. Like a lot of people mistake the stage before brownout, which is essentially where you lose energy for day-to-day things, you lose motivation. Full-on burnout is classed essentially as adrenal failure, so you can't literally get yourself out of bed. Or things like chronic fatigue syndrome are big elements of it. And also anything that basically paralyzes you from going to work. And essentially you're really at that rock bottom. So it's not brownout where, I'm tired, I need a week off kind of deal. This is like things in your body shutting down, essentially, manifesting through like lifestyle diseases or other things.
It's a really interesting topic, and I'd love to explore more of that with you, perhaps in another session, Bella. But today, we've got so much to go through.
I know, exactly. It's so funny. I just get on all the geeky stuff, and then it's like, how do you come back from the geeky stuff? But
all right. Well, in our next session with you, we're going to talk all about entrepreneurs and how they can manage their stresses better. I'm talking to Bella Zanesco, and thanks for your time today.
Pleasure. Thank you.